Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Thank you for staying with us. It's time now for the week that was. Let's take a look at the top stories that made headlines around the globe this week. Starting with, at least 287 students have been kidnapped by bandits who stormed government secondary school Kuriga in the Chikun local government area on Thursday morning. Now, that's according to a teacher in the school who narrowly escaped. Governor Uba Sani, during a visit to the Kuriga community, assured the people that he would do everything within his powers to ensure the safe return of the abducted students. Arise correspondent Nisi Gabriel reports.
Please help us. We beg you in the name of God. Where is our president? Where is our governor? Please don't let them take them away from us. Please follow them to the forest and rescue our loved ones. In some families, 7 members were kidnapped. Another 5 were taken.
After receiving reports of a bandit attack on a primary and secondary school in Kaduna, Governor Obasani led a delegation to Kuriga village in Chikun local government to get first-hand information of the incident. Narrating the tragic incident to the governor, a teacher in the school says at GSS Kuriga, 187 students are presently missing, while in the primary school, 125 pupils were initially missing, but 25 returned home.
I resumed to the school today at exactly 7:47 a.m. I entered the acting principal's office and signed. All of a sudden, the acting principal asked me to look at my back, and when I turned, we discovered that bandits had surrounded the school premises. We became confused. We didn't know where to go. Then bandits asked us to enter the bush. We obeyed them. Because there were many, and the pupils were about 700, were following us. So when we entered the bush, I was lucky to escape alongside many other people. So I returned to the village and reported what happened to the community. Immediately, our vigilante and personnel of Kadvis followed the bandits, but the vigilante did not succeed. In fact, the bandit killed one of the vigilante. We just buried him a while ago. It was when we came back from that pursuit that we blew the village head, and we started making efforts to know the actual number of pupils and teachers that were taken by bandits. At GSS Kuriga, 187 students are presently missing. In the primary school, 125 pupils were initially missing, but 25 of them escaped and returned home.
An emotional chief of Kuriga town laments the insecurity in the area and appeals to the governor to assist in the deployment of troops to secure lives and property. While addressing the community, Governor Obasani sympathized with the parents and families of the abducted students, although he says the figures of those abducted is still sketchy. However, he is working tirelessly to ensure that those abducted regain their freedom unhurt.
We have not been able to know the number of the children or the students that have been kidnapped. But what I can say here is that by the grace of God, under my able leadership, we will try as much as possible to ensure that every child return by the grace of God, inshallah. We are doing our best. I'm going to work with the community leaders. I want to work with the traditional rulers here, as well as the youth, to ensure that every child return back home by the grace of God.
Residents of Kuriga village troop out in their numbers to cheer the governor for coming to identify with them promptly. They also commend him for promising to build a police station in the community. Nisi Gabriel, Arise News, Kaduna.
Very devastating news coming in there from Kaduna State. And, you know, it's so interesting when you think about it. Yesterday, we were celebrating International Women's Day all around the world. And to just find out that, you know, even outside of these students on March 1st, there are about 200 women and children from internally displaced camps who had also been kidnapped. And then following up with this, before I even, you know, go further, just want to use this opportunity to just because there were reports that one of the security personnel from the Kaduna State Vigilante Service was actually killed during this abduction in just trying to see what he could.
It was part of the report. It was mentioned in the report.
Yes, so that's what I'm harrowing on, the fact that,
that somebody was killed.
Somebody was killed while this happened. I mean, it's very devastating news. This is the type of news that you don't want to hear. We've not seen this large amount of students, kidnapped since we had that issue with the Chibok girls. And a lot of, just trying to understand exactly what is the reason behind it. I mean, we know that we've been grappling with insecurity, but the unceasing state of kidnapping, among other criminal activities, is being always linked back to this, the lack of the local government administrations in the country. And I could hear at the end of that report the promise being made that, the police station will be built. It's not after people have been kidnapped that we're supposed to be looking at the best way to prioritize the security of those living in these areas. It is already. If we're looking at even the collapse of, the council administration and the local government joint account system, which enables governors to be able to capture resources belonging to the local government, there is a disconnect somewhere, somehow. It feels as if these children, these teachers are still being left to their own devices. I've seen the statement that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu put out saying that he's sure and he's charged the security personnel in the state to bring them back. But we're still waiting for the Chibok girls to come back years after their abduction. So, it really sets such a sad premise when you think about it. I'm hoping that eventually they will be able to, with the proper communication, with the proper linkage with the military and even the local leaders and the stakeholders in that community are able to come up with the right information and get these children back. But it's very disheartening. Just really feel for the families. You heard in that report someone saying that one family was lost about seven children. You can only imagine what that kind of family is going through at this kind of time.
Absolutely, Shaitan. I mean, the saddest part of it is that this is coming almost exactly 10 years. After the Chibok abductions, and like you rightly said, we've not witnessed this sort of large numbers, mass abductions involving pupils, involving students, since that time. Many of the, I think that you were trying to refer to the Leah Sharibu that is still being awaited, but of course, many of the Chibok girls were either rescued or returned, even though some of them, with kids and stuff like that. But you are correct, because the sense in which we have to appreciate this is the fact that it keeps happening. And you also mentioned what the president has said. Sometimes I just wonder that, is this the best? And this is not just about President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It's about any other president that is sitting there. If something like this happens, or when something like this happens, the best that you get from that president is usually a press statement from the chief press secretary or the special advisor, expressing sadness, and then putting the military apparatus and the law enforcement to task to make sure that they rescue. But when we say make sure that you get them back, and then you now read on the cover of many newspapers today that Kaduna State government, for example, has already gotten those negotiators who will speak with. Are we back to a catch-22 situation, like we had in those days when people will be kidnapped or abducted, and then we know people who are able to be in contact with them, who are able to negotiate, money exchanging hands, and then when they come back, police tell us that we have succeeded in rescuing people. It's really very traumatizing for the families, for people, that we have to be dealing with this kind of a thing every time. I listened to what Governor Ubasani said, and nothing can be more convincing, when he says, under my able leadership, we're trying to do our best. You don't even control any troop. You can't even order the commissioner of police to do anything. So you rely on powers that are outside of your purview. And therefore, you can't be making promises, frankly speaking. Call out those who are supposed to be called out. if you know them. And I think that knowing how Kaduna has panned out in the last 8 to 9 years throughout El-Rufai's period of example, we know that Kaduna was almost like a war front as far as insecurity was concerned. But here we are now, the governor is saying, oh, we'll do our best. We couldn't even see the local government chairman. I couldn't even hear anything about the commissioner of police in Kaduna State. So who is doing what other than negotiate for their return, and then money will exchange hands? It is sad. One other key point that this reminds me of was there is God, sort of helpless cry that the former First Lady, Patient Jonathan did, almost exactly 10 years ago. And then fast forward to almost 10 years ago, we have the First Lady of Nigeria, a 3-time Senator, Mrs. Oluremi Tinubu, and now advocating a capital punishment for perpetrators of kidnaps and abduction, and even challenging governors and lawmakers, to do the needful, especially when you pick pupils, the vulnerable women, when you target such vulnerable, class of people. She's saying, let capital punishment, apply. And I think that that's a strong word to come from a 3-time lawmaker and a former, former wife of the governor and the current First Lady of Nigeria. I think that we have gotten to a stage where what Mrs. Remi Tinubu is saying is that we have to confront this thing head on. And it has to go beyond just saying, oh, we are helpless, go and rescue, whereas we are negotiating with terrorists.
Yes. I think one thing that you guys both spoke about is the fact that April 14th is the 10-year anniversary of the Chibok abduction. And the public response to this abduction shows just how beaten we have been in the last 10 years, because it feels as though there is not a proper outcry, there's not proper mourning, there's not a proper state of emergency being declared by those in power when over 200 children have been kidnapped. And beyond that, the governor, even the governor Zulum of Borno State, has said till today they do not know how many IDPs were kidnapped in Borno State.
The same way in Kaduna that the governor says
they're not entirely sure about the numbers of children and people who have been kidnapped. And before that, even in Borno State, in Bama local government area on the 7th of March, there were killings in that local government area for the first time.
Correct.
And this was in a resettlement camp. So these means that these are people who have been driven away from their homes already by terrorists. And now they're being traumatized. They're being traumatized, they're being killed. And they talk about the lack of response from the security apparatus. You have people being interviewed saying, oh, they say we're the parents of the Boko Haram terrorists. And they're like, if we're the parents, then why are we being killed? These are not people that we know. And they're having to rely on vigilantes who are now losing their lives. Yes. And so when we talk about the security apparatus of this country, and when we talk about the lack of response and the lack of proactive work that is being done, then we have to hold everyone accountable along the line, because there is no reason why communities in the Northeast and communities in the core North need to rely on vigilantes, need to rely on community, support against violence when we have military, when we have police. And this is something that the president is now discussing. They've come out and said in this administration, let's discuss state police, let's discuss this. But beyond that, you have local government areas, and we've said before, we have whole local government areas. I think only 2 local government areas in Borno State have bank branches that are open. So the level of insecurity that they are dealing with on a day-to-day basis, we cannot normalize it. We cannot be immune to it. We cannot be saying these numbers, because it is actually abhorrent that we're saying over 200 children. Is it 287? Is it 282? It is absolutely shameful. It is shameful for us as a nation. It is shameful for the governor, and it's shameful for the president. Until today, there is no sense of urgency that they do not even know how many Nigerians have been taken in the last week by terrorists. It's incredible. It's just incredibly sad.
And the only other thing to add would be to urge those who are in power not to politicize, things like this. When we say that Boko Haram has been technically defeated, we have not witnessed anything, in Borno, and then things like this happen. It puts a lie to the. I appreciate the hope and the positive thought that stuff like that should not happen, but don't politicize it. Have we done the needful before we start saying that, don't worry, we've dealt with Boko Haram. We haven't, and we need to.
Especially because, just to add to that, it's a very time-sensitive situation as well, because the longer these children, these women stay with these kidnappers and these terrorists, like you said, even some of the Chibok girls that came back with children. So they had been traumatized, some of them had been raped, some of them had been killed. So it's also a very sensitive, time-sensitive issue as well, that they need to make sure they bring these kidnapped children back to their homes.
And, you know, something else for me that's incredibly painful about this is that we always talk about the low education numbers for Nigerian children.
Exactly.
And apart from the fact that you're having children being kidnapped from schools, you're putting fear in communities, you're putting fear in the parents, and then you also have resettlement camps being attacked, and you have the closing down of resettlement camps in Borno, which means that actually less children are being educated because the free education they had in those resettlement camps are no longer available. And you're saying if they return to their actual schools, then they will also be, you know, and then you have the governor of Borno State talking about how you have camps where the people are essentially, even within these resettlement camps, I think there's one with about 70,000 people. They are now living under very tense economic situation. We talk about the cost of living crisis. It is severe in certain areas in this country, especially in the northeast. And he talks about the fear of a lot of these people maybe returning to Boko Haram, maybe returning to insurgency, maybe returning to that terrorist life. And if we're talking about a governor coming out and having this conversation with the public of saying, I don't know what to do because these people are hungry, they're, you know, they're not safe here, and so they might return to this life that we have, you know, all these people who the Boko Haram terrorists that they did negotiate with, that they did give amnesty to, that they might return to a life of crime. It is something that seriously needs to be dealt with.
It's just sad, and it has to be on the front burner of what President Tinubu and his administration will need to deal with very quickly and very decisively.
Definitely.
All right, we'll proceed. And the next story is on the Inspector General of Police, Kayode Egbetokun, has sued Chioma Egodi before the Federal High Court, Abuja, for allegedly instigating the public against a product of Erisco Foods Limited through her Facebook page. CEO of Erisco Foods, Eric Umuofia, had last year alleged that a negative product review by a customer, Chioma Egodi, negatively impacted his business when she claimed that the Nagiko tomato mix she bought had too much sugar. Just this week, the Nigerian police made a post on X in which it reaffirmed its decision to proceed with the prosecution of Chioma, arguing that there is no sentiment in law. The post reads, in part, "It is imperative to caution members of the public against spreading misinformation and attempting to manipulate public sentiment. The law operates impartially, and any attempt to subvert it will be met with the full force of the legal action. The recent developments in the case are deeply worrisome, particularly the use of crowdfunding as a means to influence legal proceedings. Such actions undermine the integrity of the justice system and threaten the principles of fairness and accountability, as they are highly inimical to the existence of the rule of law."
Oh my goodness, Adesua, you are the...
I was going to come there that, you know, that this is Adesua's stuff.
This is the expert on this
Adesua did a brilliant, very brilliant, in-depth, you know, report on what is going on regarding Erisco, you know, and that poor lady, that he looks to the whole world now that she's been hounded. I read what the Inspector General, the police put up on X, and I've listened to so many other people. I think this is getting to look like it is the police against the people. It's going beyond even Erisco, because it looks like the police is now acting like the bereaved. Like the aggrieved. I mean, I don't understand it. You are almost. It appears like you almost want to threaten people that, you know, stay clear. This is not about you. Of course, it's about everybody.
Yes.
If the law is clear, let the law, you know, do what the law is meant to do. You are not the judge. The law, the case will go to the court, and you are not going to determine, you know, the outcome of the case. Why are you threatening people? Why are you showing special interest in this matter when there are other, you know, things that the police can be involved with? It's so baffling that you wonder, is there something else in this case, or they just want to use this poor girl, even if she has erred in any way? What is the intensity, you know, of a transgression that the entire police force will now be siding with one party when the case is yet to go to the court.
I mean, despite like the call out from, civil societies and Nigerians, just asking the police and the company to refrain from pushing this case or prosecuting or traumatizing, Mrs. Okoli even further. I remember watching your report, and at the end, you could just tell that she was defeated. She was drained mentally. She was just crying. And when you think about what she actually did, and you put it vis-a-vis criminal cases that are still pending, you wonder why there's so much vim behind this. And I'm curious to know.
It is the court that will determine, whether you have, err in law, yes, or it is fair comment. And I think that they should just wait for this thing to. But while we're waiting, don't try to gag anybody. Don't say that you cannot comment about it. People have commented about people in power, about first ladies, and they went to court if you feel aggrieved. But don't gag anybody and don't threaten people because you have an interest in, obviously, in a case.
It's so bizarre for me that the police would talk about certain individuals want to pervert justice, or how they are talking about the existence of the rule of law, because there are things that we require for our police, and it's actually abiding by the rule of law. My question actually is not, I understand why the Nigerian police or the person who released a statement is doubling down on their actions, because they have acted in a way, they even more so than Erisco or Chief Eric Umofia, who can do whatever he wants to do, really. And then we, the police and our laws, can decide whether his actions are right or they're legally supported. However, what my issue here is the two things. This statement captures everything. One, the Cybercrimes Act, and two, the conduct of our police force. Because we have to ask ourselves, in a country where we just spoke about over 200 children being kidnapped, why do we have police flying out a woman over a Facebook post? In a country where we talk about how much are police salaries, what is the standard of living, how much is police earning, how much money do we have for investigations, how is the Nigerian police force flying out a woman from Lagos to Abuja to face a charge over a Facebook post? Our resources are scarce.
Ridiculous when you think about it.
And then you have them putting out this statement on this week. So much has happened. And I saw a video, and it was allegedly there was allegedly an armed robbery in progress, and there was a police officer, a member of the Nigerian police officer, who was hiding behind a wall. I mean, the allegation there is that he's hiding from the robbery that was, allegedly going on. We think about our daily lives in Nigeria, what we require our police for, the level of insecurity in the nation. The police are supposed to be a level of support also to make sure that you have access to justice. The police coming out and saying that crowdfunding for somebody's legal defense is trying to, pervert the course of justice. The law cannot be unbiased or unfair if people cannot afford proper legal representation.
That's an threat.
Yes.
And it is unbecoming of the Nigerian police
force
to dabble into that sort of a thing.
And it's good they've spoken about the Cybercrimes Act, and they keep steeping in it because that act in itself and Section 24(1) of the Cybercrimes Act in and of itself is a huge problem. It is a huge problem, and our legislators, our House of Reps and our State House of Assembly, they need to come together and they need to look at that law, because anybody can wake up one day and be Chioma Okoli.
Absolutely. I mean, the point is, we must continue to emphasize this, because in a way, there's something about this, that also affects, freedom of speech and freedom of expression. Consumer protection is part of it. I listened to the Erisco fellow, and the manner in which he was grandstanding, almost threatening everybody, almost trying to bully everybody. You can't bully everybody. The worst that you will do is that you will go to court. And people other than yourself, other than police, experts in law would determine the case to know whether a consumer deserves to say. I mean, we see this thing every time, even in, so-called more advanced crimes, where people are challenging the amount of sugar in the drinks that you take, challenging the amount of fat in foods that you take. You can't say that is meant to destroy businesses. It's also about your whole life. If it's too sugary or if it's too salty, and you are making a fair comment. I mean,
you're allowed
come
to
on.
express yourself without
Absolutely. Free
feeling like
speech
your life is in danger.
cannot be submerged under this threat of Cybercrime Act. We know what Cybercrime Act is meant to go against, not for individuals who are expressing their opinion, especially when they are consumers of certain products. The police will need to understand that.
Yes,
well,
definitely.
We hope, because at this point it is a bit frightening that it does seem as though she's being scapegoated, and it's
evident. It's evident.
Well, let's move on to the next case. The Agricultural and Rural Development Secretariat of the Federal Capital Territory Administration earlier this week confirmed the looting of its warehouse at Day quarters in the Federal Capital Territory by some residents over the economic hardship in the country. Secretary of the Art Secretariat, Zachary Aliyu, had earlier visited the warehouse where the residents had looted everything in the store and vandalized the place, removing the roofs and windows. FCT Minister of State Dr. Maria Mahmood and the territory's Mandate Secretary, Greek Secretariat, Lawan Gaidam, again visited the facility on Monday for on-the-spot assessment of the incident. Well, when the federal government, I'm going to say the federal government, the presidency was making warehouses the scapegoat, when they were talking about people hoarding goods and shooting videos of them approaching warehouses and showing goods from the floor to the ceiling. Yeah. This is a natural conclusion of that line of thoughts. They made warehouses the boogeymen. They made wholesalers the boogeymen. Sometimes I wonder if they think, sometimes I wonder about the thought process that goes into some of these actions, because instead of owning the fact that there were forex shocks in the market that people were trying to deal with, instead of owning the fact that people are hungry, people can no longer, they were not affording food, instead of owning the level of food inflation that we were dealing with in this country, you had FCCPC shutting down the supermarkets in Abuja, a huge supermarket in Abuja. You had government agencies going to warehouses. You even had the governor of Niger State at that time, Bago, talking about, large quantities of food should not leave the state. If you make someone the target, all you can imagine is that people are hungry. We are living in a cost of living crisis. It is not a surprise to anyone paying attention that if you keep telling people that they're hiding food in the warehouses or they're hoarding this food and they are hungry, it is a natural conclusion to expect this incident to happen. And I hope the government holds, the presidency and his media aides, I hope they hold themselves accountable to this, because now it is a government agency's warehouse that has actually been looted. Private individuals would have had to deal with higher insurance premiums, higher security costs, because they were made the boogeyman, right? They were made that they are the problem. And now it is actually a government agency warehouse that has been raided. So I truly hope that the people who are responsible are aware that there are consequences to the language that you choose. There's consequences to the spin you choose to spin in the media or in social media, or the statements you put out. They have real life consequences, because the reality is Nigerians are in a cost of living crisis. People are hungry. People can't afford food. They said they stole the roofs and the windows. That should it's beyond vandalism. I'm sure somebody has carried window now to go and resell. And at the end of the day, when there's economic crisis, criminality increases. Definitely. And we've spoken about our police force who are focused on tin tomato instead of maybe doing investigation and being proactive. I believe our security force, they only react after something happens. Do you investigate beforehand? Do you prevent, such incidents like this? I don't see any proof of that.
Intelligence. And they can even monitor chatter that, this attack is about to happen. And I mean, this is where you're completely right. The minute I saw the story, it just took me back to the COVID era, where, we saw these warehouses that had been stockpiled with food just attacked, and you could just see the food go down like in the blink of an eye. Palliatives, yes. At the time, it was a situation of palliatives. And when, like you said, citing hunger, the high cost of living, inflation, these are the things that have made Nigerians hungry. You cannot tell people that, oh, you know, they don't have access to, they don't have access to food, they don't have access to enough money to be able to even buy this food, and then they now get wind of a storage facility that has these things and expect them not to react. And you know, at the core of the looting, we think about like food insecurity in itself in Nigeria, how we've had these issues happen over time, even backtracking to insecurity in itself, whereby the food cannot make its way down, away from the north, down, you know, down to here in these parts, the south. So, you know, you cannot necessarily blame these people, even though in itself it's not an act that goes against the law. I think what needs to be investigated first off are these bodies that are still in 2024 stockpiling food. Why are you holding on to these things when we know we've had situations where, you know, the Nigerian Customs Service has said, oh, we seized these amounts of rice, we've given it to the people. They've said, oh, there's going to be more, there's a social calendar, they're going to do direct transfer, they're going to give. But we're still seeing this hoarding happening. It needs to stop, honestly. It needs to stop.
I agree with you, but we must also be very clear in distinguishing between criminality, you know, and ordinary looting. You know, a criminal is a criminal. And if you march on a government facility or even individual facility, you know, to steal, and possibly to damage, to destroy, like we had, you know, taking windows, taking doors and things like that. And that's a criminal act.
Definitely,
you know, and there are consequences for such things. But having established that it might be a criminal act, a serious government will not just deal with the criminal aspect of it. What is pushing people? What is leading people into criminal act at a time that practically everybody is struggling, except, of course, you have direct connection, you know, to government. And so government must look deeper and be concerned that, yes, while you're trying to spin some narratives that, oh, our reforms will work, our reforms, you know, are showing some positive signs. You know, Bloomberg is reporting this. On the streets, in people's homes, in people's pockets, what are people going through? And it will get, my point has always been, when it gets to a stage that you are between life and death, and you can't feed, and people are dropping dead in market, people will be pushed to break the law. And that's where government must be concerned. Today, it might be that people are attacking government facilities. What will happen tomorrow if the situation gets more dire? It means that they can attack, you know, private facilities. It means that if a truck loaded with practically anything edible, people will march on it and take it. At what point will it get to people attacking homes, attacking other people in their vehicles, or attacking estates if care is not taken? It's a recipe for anarchy if the government is not looking at it, you know, more deeply. The government is doing a lot in dealing with insecurity, in dealing with so many things. But when hunger comes, an hungry man is an angry man, as they say. And when anger takes over anybody, you really can't predict how it will end. So I think that government will just need to do more. It is not enough to say, oh, we are already discussing with labor how much are we going to pay in terms of minimum wage. Any amount you choose to pay, what is the percentage of workers that minimum wage will touch? We're talking about the generality of the people. We're talking about the fact that this is an economy with almost half unemployment rate. Forget about the, you know, all the abracadabra of 4.5 and things like that. Things are hard out there, and government cannot continue to deny. It will push people more and more to criminality, and that's not what you want. You don't want anarchy, and you cannot predict the end of this if it continues on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis.
Definitely. And I think also, going off of what you said there, when it comes to these things that we can't predict, there are certain things that the government should be able to predict. And I also think that this is why the government, especially, you know, the language and the body language and the actual words coming from the government, the governors, the presidency, they need to be very specific about the language they use. Because the the difference between stockpiling versus hoarding is something that the average person does not know. And so if you cover everything with one language, if you say everybody is hoarding, because we need to stockpile for lower seasons, for different seasons. There's a reason why we stockpile grains. There's a reason why you hold on to food, right? Even in your house, you have a store.
There's a reason why there must be storage.
There's a reason why there must be storage, right? And so, they need to be very intentional, very careful about the language they use.
How you communicate these things, also matters.
Yes.
How you communicate it also matters, and that's an essential thing that the government, will need to get a hang on.